I was laying in bed when I was about 12 years old. I was on the verge of falling asleep when I heard what sounded like a box dropping onto hardwood floor. I thought nothing of it because this has happened to me before while on the verge of falling asleep. The second time I heard it, I knew it was real because I was wide awake. About 3 seconds later, my burglar alarm went off. I shot out of bed and ran into my mum's room and waited in the closet for the police to arrive. When they showed up, we all went downstairs and our jaws dropped. Every single cabinet in the kitchen was open. Every plate, every glass, every bowl smashed into a million pieces on the ground. We thought of it as a breaking and entering, and so did the cops, until my mother realized that every door and window was still locked and there was no sign of a break-in. You'd also think that we would have heard all the glass and smashing downstairs, but my mother turned off the burglar alarm about 50 to 20 seconds after it went off, and we heard nothing but silence. The police concluded that there were no signs of a break-in, and we had basically to go about our normal lives pretending this didn't happen. My mum put the house up for sale 4 sleepless months later. This is probably close to 10 years back. Myself and my mother were visiting her sister in the north of the country, a few hundred miles from where we lived. We had left with the intention of spending a long weekend. My aunt and her family lived close to a road unofficially called the Murder Hole. This was the name given to it by locals, as it was a frequent haunt for highwaymen. Their house was really nice, but it was literally in the middle of nowhere, at least a mile from the next house and miles away from the nearest town or shop. As we got close to my aunt's, a huge summer storm hit. Torrential rain, thunder, and lightning. The house was undergoing massive interior renovation at the time, which meant my mum and I would be spending the night crashing in the living room, as all the spare bedrooms were out of commission. The storm was so bad, the workmen actually delayed leaving until it calmed down enough for them to brave the roads. When they did leave, we spent most of the evening on the back porch, watching the storm before we turned in for the night. I crashed on the couch, while my mum took a leather divan-type sofa that was placed directly under the window that faced the driveway. Late into the night, I woke up feeling very uneasy, as if I were being watched. I opened my eyes but didn't get up. I remember a weird sensation creeping up my neck. I turned my head towards where my mum was sleeping and felt my blood chill. A black figure stood at the window, his hands up to the glass, as if he was trying to see if anyone or anything was in the room. If it wasn't for the window, he would have been able to reach out to my mum. The driveway had a very powerful light fixed on a pole at the edge of the front yard. My mum, exhausted from all the driving, was completely out, despite the figure being no more than 18 inches from her face. The figure continued to slowly scan the room, then stopped suddenly, as if he had just seen me. No light was cast into the house, so the room was completely pitch black. The storm had gotten worse, and thunder and lightning were striking frequently, as if, on cue, a lightning strike hit and lit up the inside of the living room for the briefest moment. The figure left his vantage point and started walking towards the right-hand side of the house, where there was another window, offering another view of the living room. I waited until the figure was out of sight and slid off the couch, scuttling into a doorway just off the living room, and out of the view of the second window. I peeked from behind the wall and can see the figure at the second window. By this stage, I was freaked and unsure of what to do. Lightning hit again, and the figure's head snapped right to where I was hiding. I remember being almost frozen, feeling his eyes were locked onto me, even though I couldn't see them. He left the second window and headed back towards the first. I somehow managed to move, running to the stairway in the corner of the room that led up to the bedroom of Mum's aunt. I burst in and shouted that there was a man outside looking in. Once over the initial surprise of me waking them up in such a panic, the husband, a large man in his own right, jumped up, summoned his two eldest sons who were a couple of years older than me, found two cricket bats, and marched down the stairs. The rest of the family and myself followed warily. My mother, having been woken up by the commotion, met us at the bottom of the stairs, having just been passed in the hallway by her sister's half-naked husband, trotting a cricket bat and marching out into the storm. I explained what happened, but could tell my mother was equally part skeptical as she was shocked. We waited for what seemed like an eternity, in the darkness, as no one thought, or perhaps dared, to turn on the light. Mum's friend tried to reassure us that it was just a late-night traveler who had broken down or perhaps gotten lost. Her husband and son returned after a minute or two. The husband went as far as to get changed and check the grounds before he hopped into his car and drove the road a few miles in both directions. There was nothing. There had been no sound of a car leaving the driveway or any physical evidence of anyone being outside. This did little to reassure me, as I was unable to shake the feeling of being watched that had originally woken me. We barely managed a night's sleep before we gathered our things to set out the next morning. My mother was convinced I had imagined the whole thing and told her sister so by way of apology. This annoyed me at first, although I knew it was the most logical explanation for them, as no one else had seen the figure. Looking to forget the whole experience, I did not argue the matter. Mum went to the car wanting to get an early start on our plans for the day. I quickly popped my head into the house to say my own goodbyes and apologized for waking them up last night. Our car horn sounded, and my aunt's husband remarked my mum was getting impatient, which was unlike her. I shrugged it off, but the car horn kept blaring, with two long continuous beeps, and a third final one which was a bit shorter. I went to the side of the house where the car was parked. It hadn't moved, and sat with all the doors closed apart from the passenger door on the driver's side, which was wide open. It was as I got closer to the car that I saw my mum, slumped over the steering wheel. Frantically, I pulled open the door and tried to shake her awake. I found the pulse on her neck, which seemed strong, but she seemed to be completely unconscious. I pulled her out of the car and shouted for help as I carried her to the house. I set her on the same couch I slept on the night before, and with some help of her friend, tried to bring her around from what we assumed was a random fainting spell. Thankfully, she revived quite quickly and was quite embarrassed by the fuss she felt she had caused. She didn't remember passing out or even getting in the car. We also found her watch had somehow frozen at roughly the same time that she got into the car, and it started working again later that day.